The world's fastest small parcel shipping corridor just hit a major slowdown on August 29. Postal operators across Europe and Australia made a collective decision to temporarily suspend or drastically reduce low-value shipments to the United States. The reason is simple, and it's harsh. The de minimis exemption in the U.S. tariff regime has been permanently eliminated. Imports no longer pass through that $0 customs window. For a 6-month transition period, there's now a fixed collection option of $80 per package for customs duties. Taxes and new processing requirements have officially replaced the exemption. This change is affecting international shipping flows, domestic market prices, and delivery times, all literally overnight. And this isn't just a niche category. A wide range of supply chain links, from fashion and electronic accessories to handmade crafts and spare parts, are all hitting the same wall at the same time. The official framework is clear. The duty-free entry point that had been in place for years for packages under $800 is now closed. The U.S. administration announced a universal regime for all countries, moving away from the previous system that handled imports from China and Hong Kong separately. Now, every low-value shipping item arriving at the U.S. border is subject to either the fully applicable tariff rate or that fixed $80 fee for 6 months. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, data requirements, deposit accounts, and new collection infrastructure are now mandatory at all ports and airport mail facilities. When the International Postal Network couldn't find enough software or personnel to adapt this quickly, the decision effectively became, close up shop, or face massive delays. In short, the new tariff language created an overnight compliance cost for market trading. The response was a chain reaction. Germany-based networks announced a temporary suspension of operations. Other countries left the corridor open only for documents and very low-value personal shipments. Operators in Belgium, the Nordic countries, and along the Mediterranean route all preferred the same phrase: package acceptance to the U.S. has been suspended. Instead of postal containers, they recommended private courier and express carrier channels. Australia Post made a similar decision, shutting down commercial package flow with a partial suspension, only keeping letters and gifts under $100 separate. The common rationale is the same across the board: a total lack of readiness in their back-office systems for customs duty collection, new data transmission formats, and processing power. This scenario is pushing shipping business away from the postal network and toward express cargo. International shipping costs, delivery times, and risk distribution are all changing in an instant. Let's look at why this is so effective, in bare numbers. In 2024, 1.36 billion packages entered the U.S. market under the de minimis ban, with a market value of approximately $64 to $65 billion. This volume was the main conduit feeding the affordable price plus fast delivery experience for the domestic consumer. The new regime suddenly imposed 2 new extras: tax collection and customs declaration. Postal operators had optimized their systems for simple letters and parcels within a multilateral trading system. Now, they need to collect intricate details like product code, origin, value, buyer, seller, payment info, and calculate customs duty, all in real time. On the business side, the multi-seller marketplaces and small producers generating this data are highly fragmented. This means data source incompatibility for supply chains, especially in this initial phase. The most visible result is the shift from postal to express. European and Australian postal networks are directing sellers to use express carriers if they want to ship under a duty-paid (DDP) model. The express side is technically ready, but it's expensive, and there are capacity constraints. Now, for every package entering the U.S., either an ad valorem tariff rate, say, 10% to 50%, or that fixed $80 duty for 6 months will be charged. This translates directly into a consumer pricing shock for low-priced products. When an $80 fixed tax is added to a $12 accessory, the domestic consumer is far more likely to click the cancel purchase button. Because of this, a significant portion of global sellers have turned to 2 interim solutions: setting up a micro-warehouse inside the U.S. or temporarily halting sales altogether. Large platforms with fast inventory turnover can withstand this transition for a while. If their warehouses are full, the domestic market can still be supplied from within, even if imports are locked out. But this is only a temporary comfort. As warehouse inventory depletes, the cost base for new sales changes. When standard customs duty applications begin, the final price in the shopping cart increases. Even if subsidized by advertising budgets, market behavior reacts. Campaigns might try to soften consumer pricing, but the margin erosion is not sustainable from a business perspective. In short, those who say they've managed in the short term will face serious budget pressure in the medium term. The hardest hit will be small and medium businesses, SMBs, and the artisan ecosystem. Workshop-style manufacturers in Europe were creating value by shipping directly to the US for export sales. Now, to ship the same product, they will either have to contract with an agent that collects customs duty or rent a small warehouse within the United States. Both steps represent a significant new cost. On the market side, delivery times for niche products will lengthen, and consumer pricing will become more volatile. During busy seasons like back to school, the buy it didn't arrive, return it cycle will increase. Public frustration will grow as stories of wedding gifts, event supplies, and other time-sensitive products stuck in customs become more common than delivered on time notifications. The technical burden on postal networks cannot be underestimated. New data standards for international shipping, EDI flows, tax calculation logic, and CBP collection deposits are all required. Postal operators are primarily non-profit public service institutions. It is incredibly difficult for them to transform into small customs agents in a matter of weeks. Therefore, a reasonable roadmap for Europe and Australia is clear: pilot programs on limited routes, early DDP adoption for specific product groups, followed by a gradual expansion. Until these programs are implemented, interim solutions like partial suspension and documents only will continue. These solutions also create permanent friction on consumer pricing because they shift the cost of international shipping to private couriers. From a public policy perspective, the U.S. government's goal is a triad of revenue, security, and fair competition. It wants to increase tariff collection for revenue, scan for risky content for security, and protect domestic producers from a wave of low-taxed imports for fair competition. These 3 points are valid targets. However, in practice, a balance is needed between speed and compliance. A transition period of just 1 month is insufficient to update software and processes in complex international shipping networks. The result was a collective break by agencies all simultaneously seeking answers to questions like, who will collect? How will it be declared? What data is mandatory? Let's illustrate the price impact with a simple example. If a small $25 accessory is to be shipped from Europe to a customer in the US, the seller must choose between that fixed $80 duty for the transition period or an ad valorem collection based on the tariff rate. It's no surprise that the seller's total cost, including shipping and fees, can rise to the $110 to $130 range. At that point, market rationality comes into play: cancel the sale, use a temporary U.S. warehouse for bulk entry, or abandon the category entirely. All three mean a loss of variety for consumers and a narrowing of margins for businesses. The technical answer to how long will this last is, until compliance is achieved. As postal networks establish third-party collection platforms, duty calculation modules, and data verification systems, corridors will gradually reopen. Calls for coordination are coming from the UN Postal Authority level, which gives us a hint at the compliance timeline. Still, the permanent framework is clear: de minimis is not coming back. Taxes will be in effect for every low-value import entering the U.S. border. In the medium term, market trading will revert to a DDP default, and the end-user consumer pricing will reflect this cost. Large platforms can make this cost relatively invisible; small sellers lack that capacity. The question of who wins, who loses is natural. On the winning side are express operators, compliance software companies, and firms automating duty collection. On the struggling side are microsellers, niche businesses, and workshops that produce to order. On the U.S. side, public satisfaction will decline in the short term. Stories of waiting at customs will increase, replacing unboxing videos. Social media platforms will see a rise in "my gift came back" narratives, which puts pressure on public sentiment. However, expecting a policy reversal from the U.S. administration does not seem realistic. The new normal will be low-value imports subject to tariffs. Let's look at consumer behavior. In categories with low price elasticity, like hobby supplies or custom-sized accessories, a tendency to wait and see or find an interim solution emerges. Some buyers will turn to sellers within the US and Canada. Distributors shipping from Mexico and Canada will seize the opportunity. Others will return to large marketplaces like Amazon, preferring a prime-like, fast delivery, tax-paid package. This shift accelerates a structural change from the direct-to-consumer international shipping model to a U.S. domestic warehouse plus DDP model. In the medium term, third-party logistics, 3PL, and warehouse companies in the U.S. may see a boom in demand. This creates employment but doesn't bring lower consumer pricing, it only mitigates the shockwave. 3 practical steps stand out for SME solutions. First, establish a DDP infrastructure. Display customs duty and taxes in the cart, collect them, and declare them on behalf of the seller. Second, maintain a small warehouse within the U.S. using micro-fulfillment, especially for seasonal products. Third, review the product mix for exports. Redirect products that become financially unviable under the $80 fixed tax to domestic markets in nearby regions. These steps have a cost, but they create a pre-priced experience instead of post-purchase surprises and ultimately reduce return rates. The back-to-school season is the first major stress test for this decision. For parents and students, the delivery date is as decisive as the price. When the postal network shuts down, a few days' delay becomes an irreparable customer experience. Behaviors like order cancellation, searching for alternatives, or settling for a more expensive local product will be observed. The situation may normalize after the season ends, but peak periods like the holidays, New Year's, and Valentine's Day will be the second and third stress tests. Each test reinforces the same lesson within the market: switch to DDP, set up intermediate warehouses, and lock in express capacity. The international political dimension is simple. European and Australian operators narrowed the corridor not to punish the US, but because they couldn't keep up with the new duty collection and data requirements. This is a typical result when a single country implements a rapid, hard change in a multilateral system. That system renews itself at its own pace. When one country accelerates, traffic slows until others can complete their processes. The most effective move to accelerate this evolution is to standardize data requirements and accredit third-party collection platforms. This would ease the burden on postal networks and reduce congestion at ports and on trade routes. So, what can we expect next? In the short term, the feeling of lines closed will remain in the headlines. In the medium term, European and Australian networks will gradually reopen, first for specific product groups, then for a broader list. In the long term, the equation of no de minimis, DDP exists will become the norm. There will be a one-time price level effect on the economy, but market volatility will eventually decrease. As new regulations from Congress or technical notices from government agencies clarify the details, the stop messages will evolve into "continue with this method on this date" announcements. As we said at the beginning, the main idea is simple: European and Australian postal networks are temporarily excluding small package flows to the US, thereby redrawing the map of global e-commerce logistics. This isn't a carrot-and-stick move, it's one of compliance and cost. The permanent regime will create permanent friction in prices for the domestic market, but it will also accelerate the long-debated goals of data transparency and security. The roadmap for businesses is clear: switch to DDP, plan your warehouse and 3PL strategy, and adjust your product mix according to the new tax regime. The message for the public is also straightforward: the era of fast and cheap is being replaced by a slightly more expensive but more predictable period. Let's leave the final word to our audience. In the short term, who do you think should foot this bill, the seller or the buyer? We'd love to see your thoughts in the comments. If you found this useful, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We'll continue to follow this topic with real-world examples as new data emerges.